Good.
This is the May 14th, 2019 Plan Zoning and Commission meeting. Peter, you're sitting tonight, and for Matt. Our first item. What happened to the minutes? Did I hand them to you? Very good.
No.
Do I have a motion on the minutes?
You just made one, didn't
Yep.
you? I'll second it.
Any comments?
None. I didn't see any corrections.
Do you have that? Who seconded the?
I second it.
Okay.
I have two comments. One is it says that we met at Sullivan Hall, and I think we met here.
Well, that is absolutely true.
And secondly, on the item for Harbor Yard, it says with an easement for public use and limited improvements. I think it should say, and no structure.
No structures to be built. Yes. I hear it.
Any other comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? It's passed. Our next item is a closed executive session.
You need a motion, Mr. Chairman, and a 2/3 vote to adjourn to executive session.
May I have a motion?
Move to executive session.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So we'll go to executive session and return after.
He moved?
Yes. We're back in session. No decisions were made or votes taken in the closed executive session. The next item is discussion of the zoning regulation amendment with Mark Barnhart.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we distributed a draft proposal in your packet, and I had a previous discussion with our chairman, Mr. Wagner, and he suggested to put this matter on an agenda for some preliminary discussion as to the background of where this is coming from. So we've invited Mark Barnhart to join us tonight to talk about his interaction with the Affordable Housing Committee and the genesis of this proposal for a preliminary discussion before this. It would have to be subject to a future application should this go forward, but just a preliminary outline of the background and history about this.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, members of the commission. So a few years back, the commission had acted upon a proposal from the Affordable Housing Committee to amend its regs to provide for an inclusionary zoning regulation that mandates that for developments that create 10 or more housing units, those developments are subject to a requirement that they set aside 10% of those units, not less than 10%, as affordable or below market rate units. That covers both for sale and rental developments. The committee had considered at that time, but opted not to include a payment in lieu option in its proposal to you that was ultimately adopted. And there were a couple reasons for that. Although that's a fairly common framework, many communities have a payment in lieu option in addition to an inclusionary zoning requirement. But the committee opted for a more simpler framework. They thought it would be, there was a certain simplicity and elegance to just having a straightforward requirement that requires developers to set aside 10% of those units as below market rate units. In addition to that, the committee felt it be advantageous to create the units sooner and dispersed throughout town and integrated in private developments, private sector developments part of the mixed income community. So for those reasons, the committee thought that was the best way to go. And obviously the commission agreed. Since that, we do review where things are and report back to not only this group but to the RTM, and I think the committee's had further opportunity to take a look at this and understands that there are certain limitations of the existing framework, specifically that which might apply to for sale or ownership type developments, and thought it might be worthwhile taking a fresh look at this and providing for some flexibility, or at least giving the commission some options, an additional tool by which you could help preserve or create additional affordable housing units here. I think overall, so what's before you is the result of those discussions. We did take a look at other communities that provide for a payment in lieu option. Again, we are proposing something we think is fairly simple to understand and administer. It applies to for sale, proposed for sale below market rate units only. The formula provides for a percentage based on the area median income for this area. That's consistent with how other communities address this. In nearby, we looked specifically at Darien, Stamford, and Norwalk, all of which have similar constructs. And again, I think our thought was this would provide the commission with some flexibility to address those circumstances going forward. I think I would be remiss if I didn't say the committee does believe that it still is advantageous where possible to create the units within those developments, to disperse those throughout the community, to integrate those within developments. So the thought is that, and part of the reason or rationale behind setting a formula such as what's proposed, 320% of the area of the area median income, was that it would be a substantial penalty, if you will, so it would be used rather sparingly. It wasn't something that we thought should be such that community developers would opt out all the time, or at least put you under pressure to opt out all the time. So that was the thinking behind it, and be happy to answer questions that the commission members may have, and then if you so choose, I guess we would then proceed to making a formal application.
I have a question. Mark, what is the problem we're trying to solve here?
I think what we've seen is that there are circumstances, particularly with for sale developments, that we hadn't anticipated fully, and it may not work. The existing framework may not work as well as what was intended. So I think, again, that's a judgment call for this group at some point, but we at least wanted to provide some flexibility for you to consider that as an option. It was something that we had talked about and considered at the time we made the initial application. And again, the thinking was we wanted to opt for a more simple approach, and certainly I think, and many of the committee members believe the same way, that it's more advantageous wherever feasible to create the units at the time, as part of a development, as opposed to just asking for a payment in lieu and putting it into a fund that would be used to create units elsewhere at some future date. So that was the issue.
To whose advantage is this amendment?
Well, I would hope that it would be to the advantage of the town. You have to determine whether or not an individual application would be warranted. If we got to that point, there would need to be consideration of each application on its merits and make a determination as to whether or not it was warranted and in the public interest to do so. So
to do
again,
what? To have a payment in lieu?
to do a payment in lieu. Right.
But I guess I'm back to, why do we even need this? I mean, what is the problem that's causing us to propose that we need this?
We can definitely see circumstances. We've met with applicants or developers that have brought up issues that we believe were not fully appreciated at the time. So again, we think that there would be some reason for you to have some flexibility to consider this going forward. But at the same time, we don't think it's, if we're going to consider individual applications, we want to have a framework that deals with, provides some flexibility for this body to deal with those applications in the future. It's not just a
So
one-off.
is the problem that we might be putting the brakes on development if we don't allow this option for developers? Is that where we're going?
We don't see the same issue as it relates to rental development.
Right.
So for the most part, the rental developments have functioned or performed as intended. In fact, we would like to propose to this body that you consider increasing the percentage set aside
Well,
specifically
going
in the
back to the
TOD
first-
area. But for sale, I think that's a unique circumstance that at the time we were focused primarily on the rental. So again, we really see it as giving you an additional option, providing an additional tool and some flexibility to consider alternative arrangements in the event that you don't think that you ultimately decide that it's not advantageous to go with the below market rate units at the development itself.
Steve?
The dollars and cents. Oh, thank you. In terms of dollars and cents, what is 320% of the area median income?
Based on the current 2018 median family income, it would be $300,000, $300,160 per unit.
Mm-hmm.
Ran the same formula, looked at again how other communities consider or regulate this. In Darien, it's they require a cash payment equivalent to 300%, which is equivalent to $202,350. In Stanford, it's they don't actually require 80% AMI units, so their formula has an offset for to make them equivalent to 50% AMI units, so it would produce a cash payment of $78,000. In Norwalk, it's based on 270% of the statewide median, which yields a cash payment of $260,000. So
And Fairfield was 300?
320.
And that would be the minimum,
Correct,
right? And we could set it higher if we so chose.
if you so choose.
And there would be nothing that would preclude us from getting a recommendation from the Affordable Housing Committee, both either as to the propriety or the amount that they would recommend if we sought their guidance.
Yeah, I think that the committee would like to do that, sure.
Mhm. Yeah, but we don't need to put that in here. I mean, we would have the option, of course, of seeking their input, of course.
Yes,
And this would only be on for sale units,
as proposed, yes.
as proposed, yeah.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I can see a problem where with some very expensive units, where common charges or assessments might be prohibitive for someone of limited means.
That was the case that we were looking at specifically, yes.
Mhm, yeah.
Hypothetical as well as the case, yeah.
Right. And this money instead would go towards the trust fund that's been established?
Yes.
Yeah.
Could you repeat that last bit about I didn't understand that last comment.
Well, for instance, on a for sale unit in a condominium.
I'm sorry, they're making
Yeah.
so much noise I can't
On
hear.
a for sale unit on a condominium, the board can elect to impose special assessments if they want to put in a swimming pool, if they want to do, you know, they can, or if they need a new roof, and you can have a substantial assessment without regard to the respective income of the residents, and it could be a hardship in certain circumstances.
So, but is that the intent of this, that these funds be available to people?
No.
More units to
No.
to
No.
offset? Okay, because then I have a question, like, how does this, we got the minimum, but I guess how does it apply? So like, if you have somebody coming in with a 10-unit proposal, the way it is now, one of those would have to be BMR, right?
Right.
So that means this 320% would be applied toward that one unit, or toward the total cost of the
You
project, or
It would be the one unit that would be the
one unit?
payment
So
in
they
lieu
pay
of
that
the-
fee, and then they don't build a unit, and then we're still down units.
Do they
I
not
don't
build
see,
the-
no. I
Excuse
mean,
me?
if this money goes into a fund that maybe potentially could be used to build buildings somewhere down the line, but we're
Right.
still in the hole on units, and that's, to me, that's the focus of where we have the problem, that we've been.
I'm sorry, though, but does that mean the unit doesn't get built?
Yes.
Yeah, this is in lieu of building the unit, so we're still in the hole, still fighting the fight,
No,
trying
they
to get out of
would-
this.
They would,
Be built as part of that development.
Yeah, but
Right.
somewhere else potentially.
they would build 10 units, they just wouldn't have one within that development
and then
that
we'd
would
have-
be
Oh, so they
deed
would build it,
restricted.
it would be
Yeah.
10,
It would be 10, right.
okay.
So
It would
10
just
market
be
rate units.
market rate,
Not
yes.
below market. Yeah, but they wouldn't have any that would qualify for the low-income housing, and we'd still have that problem that we were trying to deal with. We'd have the
And-
money to help us with that, but
Well,
And that's, you know, I agree with that, and I think the committee does as well. I think we would recommend that this be used rather sparingly,
Yeah.
which is why we prefer the units be created, because putting money into a fund doesn't necessarily in of itself yield additional affordable or below market rate units. You have to obviously then take a secondary step to build them at some point. So it's just it's an option. It provides, again, some options for this commission to consider an alternative arrangement if you deem that appropriate.
Question, this would be in our discretion as to whether we would accept the payments?
Yes.
In lieu of? I mean,
Yes.
Just any kind of reasonable standard that goes with it, or can we kind of pick and choose, I guess depending on the application that comes forward, or?
it says in our sole discretion.
Yes.
There's no limitation on our discretion as I read this.
No, and
Yeah.
I don't either, and normally when we have applications, there's no precedent, I get that, it's just, I was just curious as to what your thoughts were about, you know, if this is something we could do per application, or if we're gonna use it once, do we open the door to use it all the time, because we,
That's how we view it.
excuse me,
That's how I would view it, yes, within your sole discretion.
sole discretion,
Yeah.
pick and, okay?
Yep.
Where did the 320% come from?
Again, reviewing looking at other communities that do have this as an option, those that I mentioned, we wanted to set a figure that was in the same ballpark, but we thought, again, should be a little higher than what's proposed, so that's what we came up with.
I'll tell you what I'm thinking about. Number one is, what was said earlier, is that payment in lieu doesn't build a unit. And if it's around 300,000, that might build a unit, but it wouldn't pay for the land. So I'm wondering if we're really meeting our goals. I'm just thinking about this, if we're setting money aside and it isn't really producing a unit right away, or it's only going to produce part of a unit or something later. And the second thing is that you had mentioned at the beginning that one of the goals is to have mixed income neighborhoods. And this is almost anti-mixed mixed income neighborhoods. So those two things certainly.
Yeah, that was the same thought I had.
I guess we can say, well, we don't have to do it. It's optional for each case. But it opens up the door to sort of not meet the goals of affordable housing.
Well, again, those are the issues that the committee has wrestled with as well, almost from the inception. When we first proposed it, we considered a payment in lieu option, and these were the internal debates that the committee had at that time. There's still mixed opinions with regard to it, to be perfectly frank, but at the same time, I think providing this body or the town with some additional options or flexibility to consider that an alternative scheme, I don't think that that's a bad idea to give you guys some other tools in your toolkit. Whether you use it or not is up to you. So I think that's where the committee ultimately was coming from, giving you some options there to consider something. If in your determination, the present framework doesn't work as well as what was intended. Understanding there's always, drawbacks or limitations to any approach you take. So again, I think that was our feelings on it.
Didn't we vote on something like this in the Southport project, the one right near 95, where originally it was going to be a BMR unit, and then after the fact they said, is that what it was? And they said they were having trouble selling it or something?
That particular project was approved by the commission before the inclusionary zoning standard existed. And there was an application to extend the special permit that was denied and was appealed, and in settlement of that issue, in order to effectuate a continuation, they agreed to abide by the 10% affordable housing in order to get, as a condition of getting the extension of the permit.
Maybe I'm thinking of a different project. I'm thinking of the one over by the library, by
Yeah,
Pequot Library. Is that the one?
Westway Road, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yes, all right. So that presently is required to have 2 affordable units.
Yeah, I thought they came to us recently with an offer about doing something like this, like doing a payment in lieu of having to actually make them.
Well, that was a stipulated judgment which
No, I
they
thought it was
may
this project.
wish to, they haven't formally done so.
Okay.
They may, but they haven't done so.
All right, I'm misunderstanding.
To be candid, the committee, myself and the committee met with the developer of that. We talked about the circumstances around that project. So we do understand and appreciate there are some limitations to the current approach that may warrant, you guys taking a look at it. But by the same token, the committee didn't want to, if you're going to do something along these lines to provide for a payment in lieu option, it needs to be considered in the broader scheme of things, something that will work not for a specific project per se, but in general for the town. So I think that's why the committee felt it appropriate to provide this proposal to you tonight.
What is the amount, income amount for the family of 4 in Fairfield? $93,000. Okay. So then there's usually a maintenance fee every year, usually around $2,000 or $3,000 to live in any of these condos. Isn't there usually a maintenance fee, annual fee? Common charges.
Any condominium association can set what their common charges are, depending on.
And then on top of that, there's special assessments, as the Commissioner said, if you need heavy maintenance.
That's up to the unit owners.
How does a person, $90,000, a family of 4, which he's paid less for, right? Because it's affordable.
Yeah, I think it goes 320.
How does, is he expected to pay the regular maintenance fee that everyone else does, the common charge that everyone else does, and the assessments that everyone else does?
Yes. Yeah, the sales price
Is
of
less.
an 80% unit is going to be in the low 200,000s.
80% of
So the
600.
family of 4, $93,800 income would translate to a maximum sales price of between $205,000 and $210,000.
Oh,
At present.
so they wouldn't be living in a $600,000 condo.
Yes, they would.
So in this scenario, that same 210, they'd be paying maybe they probably wouldn't 320. That's a big difference. But
Right.
but if it makes it easier for them to sell it at market rate, then correct. I don't know.
The rate, though, shall be equal to a sum that is not less than 320%. it's equal to 320 or the minimum is 320?
Minimum. It says,
Minimum.
not less than 3.
Not less than,
Shall be equal
yeah.
to a sum that is not less than.
right.
I would think that's a floor.
Oh, I see what you're saying,
320% is a floor, and then I could, on a certain application, make it 350%, 250%, or
Could make it
400%.
500,000.
Right, or 500 if
Well, I mean, is that, is that the idea that it's a floor?
No, you're not misreading it.
Okay,
no.
so it's a floor then.
But
okay.
it is a draft or proposal.
No, that's fine, but I'm just trying to make
Yeah.
sure, because I.
You're not misreading it.
Commissioner McAleese pointed out, I first saw equal to, and I just kind of skipped over the rest, but then reread it and saw that it was more of a floor than an equal to.
If we clarify that, I agree.
I'm not sure I like that.
So,
All of a sudden
just
now I
for my own-
Pick and choose, I get to pick and choose the amount.
If a developer was having a problem
idea.
with the low-income units and selling them at such a low price that potentially the resident couldn't afford common charges or special assessments, I think that's the example you brought up. If he sells all the others, can he nevertheless rent 2 units below market?
I think that option would be available, yes.
Anybody else?
Also,
Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Next item is old business, 175 Jefferson Street. Construction at Sacred Heart University, new students' residence halls.
Okay. This proposal is for 2 of the final 3 buildings in the build-out of the former Jewish home property known as the Upper Quad. The 3rd of those 3 buildings will be the subject of a hearing in a few minutes. These residence halls will be 3 stories. The proposal is part of a continuing effort of the university to increase residential housing on campus and taking students out of neighboring residential areas. During the hearing, there was some discussion, and the applicant agreed to install sidewalks along the frontage of Jefferson Street between the 2 site driveways. The relevant standards, standards for consideration for a special exception are as follows. Number 1 is the location, type, character, and size of the buildings in harmony with and conform to the appropriate and orderly development of the town and neighborhood, and not hinder or discourage the use of adjacent property or impair its value. Is the nature and location of the use in buildings or structures such that there's adequate access for fire protection? Are the streets serving the proposed use adequate to carry prospective traffic with provisions made for entering and leaving the property without creating traffic congestion? Is the proposed use in compliance with the conservation and development? That is all I have at this point, Mr. Chairman.
Can I have a motion for discussion? Oh, and Commissioner Gordon, you're sitting in for me. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
I don't have really much to say on the subject. I thought it was a very good application. Met the regs as far as master plan, or part of their plan right now for that area in the quads. It is inside the campus itself. Structures and the buildings look great. Seem to meet the standards that the application. So aside from that, I thought it was a good application.
Commissioner Levy?
I would agree, and the agreement to provide the sidewalks as outlined by Mr. Wendt, I think will be a nice improvement on the project.
Anyone else? Mr. Wendt, were there any other conditions that we discussed last time? I don't remember.
Well, there would be a bond, but that's just a standard condition. That was the only thing really that was kind of discussed at the hearing. There was testimony about the drainage, but the only thing I think that was really discussed was the sidewalks.
Okay. And the sidewalks Do we need to put that into the motion?
Yeah, it was presumed, we could certainly add it for clarity, but they agreed, there was some discussion about to what extent the sidewalk should be implemented, and the applicant agreed that they would propose to do it between the site driveways. There's a pretty expansive frontage on Jefferson Street to connect from their existing sidewalk to the last, between the two site driveways of these dorms.
Tom, are you amenable to including?
Yeah, for clarity's sake, yes.
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Anyone else have anything to say? We're ready to vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The item passes. Our next item is compliance 2317 Blackrock Turnpike.
This application, Mr. Chairman, is the current, soon-to-be former location of Lennox Jewelers. You may recall that this commission has approved Lennox's relocation across the street to the former HSBC Bank branch. Their current space is being divided into 3 tenant spaces, one of which we've already approved administratively for a retail optician space. This is a change of use for a portion of that space to a physical therapy use, a professional office for a physical therapy operation that takes 1/3 of that space. The parking is actually, it does not increase the parking draw from that of retail. We think it complies with the regulations and recommend its approval.
Move to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Levy?
Based on comments from staff, I see no reason to deny it.
I agree.
Anyone else? I also don't see any reason to deny. Glad the space is being used quickly.
Yeah.
Let's vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimously. So we'll move now to public hearing.
Ready, Mr. Chairman? Chairman, members of the commission, for the record, my name is Bill Fitzpatrick. I'm an attorney in Fairfield with the law firm of Fitzpatrick, Frey, and Bologna, with offices at 1735 Post Road. I'm here tonight representing Sacred Heart University. As you know, is located at the intersection of Park Avenue and Jefferson Street. Sacred Heart property, the Jewish Home for the Elderly. The property contains 15.4 acres located in the R3 zoning district. It's abutted by the existing university on the east, south, and west. The university uses a permitted use in the R3 zone by a special exception approval. The university is completed. There was a special exception approval from this commission. Renovation of the existing 5-story Bennett building. Property that now known as Toussaint Hall is being utilized as student housing. Another architectural component of the redevelopment. Properties, the construction of 2 mirror residential halls to the west of the amphitheater steps. Residence hall combination serves as a connection of the existing Sacred Heart Quad on the east and the upper campus on the west. The construction of the 2 mirror residential halls is underway. The commission at the zoning hearing on April 23rd of this year, the university at the zoning hearing on April 23rd of this year proposed the construction of 2 additional residence halls on the new upper quad, labeled A and B. Thank you for your approval. Building C was specifically not part of that application. I stated that Building C would be the subject of a future special exception, and here we are. So this application pertains to the construction of Building C, the final building of the new upper quad. A variance application pertaining to the heights of Buildings A, B, and C was approved by the Zoning Board of Appeals on November 1, 2018. In addition, A variance for an additional 0.23% of floor area ratio on campus was approved by the Zoning Board of Appeals on April 4, 2019. The proposed residence hall will contain 3 floors in conformance with the relevant zoning regs. This proposal is a continuation of the university effort to increase student residential housing on campus, thereby achieving the dual goal of increasing the number of students on an existing well-designed campus and taking students out of neighboring residential areas. At this point, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Mr. Kevin Herrick, an architect with the SLAM Collaborative from Glastonbury, to outline the specifics of proposed residence hall, Building C.
Good evening, Kevin Herrick from the SLAM Collaborative. We're the architects of record for the project. Been here a few times and I appreciate your interest in the project. As Bill mentioned, we're talking today about Building C. If you look at the site plan, the twins that are under construction are the cone buildings here, A and B, just recently approved a few moments ago, to the left, and then to the project north, Building C. You can see the dotted line representing the delineation between the 2 applications. Minimal amount of site work being planned for Building C, basically a handful of parking spaces, just kind of healing the earth from the excavation of the new building into the existing parking, essentially the plan. Not a surprise, this building is about bringing more beds to campus. This particular building, I think I've mentioned in the past, the complex of Upper Quad is composed of some apartments, some mini suites, and then some full suites where basically it's an apartment without a kitchen. This building here has exclusively 4-bedroom suites with a couple of RA units. You see highlighted in the upper right. So you see the 2 double bedrooms share a common living room and what we call a deconstructed bathroom where there's a toilet room, a shower room, and sinks to share outside the bathing facility. This is a rendering that I know that you've seen a couple times as recently as just a few weeks ago. So you see from top to bottom Building A, B, Building C, Toussaint Hall, which was been open now for over a year. Plan to be turned over to the university in December of this year. Building C represents, I would say, the main entrance, main parking or parking lot. So you can enter into the building on this side. There's actually a 2-story pass-through that I'll show you here that brings you onto the quad side. This building has about 122 beds, which are mostly on the upper floors. This is the first building to offer a dining facility. So we have a 200-seat dining hall, which you see in this oval shape here to the right. I'd like to kind of give you a little bit more detail of the building as we get a little closer. You can see really traditional detailing coming off of really continuing the aesthetic that began with the twins and continued through buildings A and B. So in this area here, you're on the quad, about to enter the main entrance where you can actually walk through the building out to the parking to the north. You see the 2-story dining hall to the right. If we were to walk into these doors, you would see this lobby, which represents a 2-story lobby that connects the north parking to the right, the quad to the left. We're actually standing right outside of the doors of the dining hall, which looks something like this. So this dining hall, which faces south, gets lots of natural light. It becomes a beacon on the quad itself, a real gathering place. We think it'll be a terrific place to be. It's served by what I like to call a scattered servery. So students come in, they have their choice to scatter and go to a couple of different food stations, ultimately coming to a couple points of sale, and then they can go out to the dining hall, which is essentially right behind this camera angle. I'm not meaning to be too quick, but this is concludes today's presentation on Building C. We didn't think it was necessary to show the animations that flew around that we had for last week. It would just be redundant, but those animations did actually have Building C in it, and ultimately that's what this rendering came from. So if there's any questions, I'd be want to take them at the end, or if there's any questions now, happy to answer.
Where do the services come in for the kitchen, like, you know, deliveries and stuff?
Sure, so that's a good question. I showed the north parking lot over here. There's a service entrance, a concealed loading dock. Maybe the best place is to go right here.
Oh, I see.
So there you go right there. So the trucks can actually go in undercover, and there's a loading dock that backs right up to the kitchen.
And that drive that's in, like, parallel with the truck, that goes off in the lower right corner, that's the one that goes right out to the street there,
Yep.
right? Yeah.
Yep, goes right out to Jefferson. Yep.
How do they serve, like, is that whole complex, I'm just more my own curiosity, but is that whole complex served by like a central plant for heating, cooling, and all that, or is it, they have their
No,
own?
each one of the buildings is a standalone, has its own heating plant. And remember, building A and B, they're called A and B, they're actually connected, they're one building. But no, they produce their own hot and cold water and heating and air conditioning.
Okay.
So these are fan coil units, much like a hotel room might have,
Right.
except a little more elegant. They're up in the ceilings and concealed.
Thank you.
Are you having the shades in the dining room? The south-facing dining room, are you putting the shades between the glass layers?
Not between the glass, but there are shades that come down from the two-story windows.
I have a question about the number of girls, and I'm not sure what the person to answer.
I'm sorry, I don't think your mic's on, actually.
Okay. I have a question about the number of students, the number of beds, but that's probably not yours.
The beds is 122.
No, I meant the total number of beds on campus when you finish all this construction.
Oh, yeah, I have that number on this show here. Bear with me. So 898 is upper quad.
Okay.
That's just tuition.
They have 5,500 students is the goal, and I'm just.
Oh, number of beds for the whole campus?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Boy. Geez, I'm sorry, I don't, there's a lot of dorms outside of this particular site, so.
Right.
Yeah, I guess we'd have to find that information out for you.
Okay. And I was just wondering how many off-campus students you would have compared to how many beds you have when you achieve this 5,500 student goal. But it's that vice president who was here last time, the time before. who
I've
answers
been
and knows
informed there are
that.
2,200 students living off campus.
Okay.
This will bring 122 of those on.
Oh, you currently have that, okay.
900 for the upper
Yeah.
quad, 898. Thank you, Kevin. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Michael Galante of Frederick P. Clark was unable to prepare a report for Building C. I would note that the proposed construction is a residence hall and dining hall, and as such, it will simply shift the number of students from off-campus to on-campus facilities. This will reduce traffic to and from the campus from off-campus housing. This conclusion is consistent with the letter report of Mr. Galante dated April 23rd of this year and submitted to the commission as part of the Building A and B presentation. This application was the subject of an inland wetland application to the Conservation Commission, was approved. A copy of that approval was submitted as part of this application. Proposal was reviewed at Code Enforcement. All relevant suggestions were incorporated. The proposed residence hall C construction complies with the relevant zoning criteria. As I noted earlier, 2 variances were obtained. I'd like to submit a copy of the height variance, a copy of the FAR variance, a copy of a letter from Malone and McBroom confirming Building C is covered by the earlier conservation approval, and a sidewalk plan for Jefferson Street. Now, the sidewalk plan is already been mandated by the commission, but it might be interesting for you to see it in any event. At this point, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to sum up and conclude, making specific reference to Section 27 of the zoning regulations. Relevant factors for consideration by the commission in reviewing a special exception application are outlined in Section 27.4 of the regulations. 27.4.1 states the proposal shall be in harmony with the appropriate and orderly development of the town and neighborhood, not discourage the appropriate development and use of adjacent property. The primary factors to be noted in this case are twofold. First, the Sacred Heart University use of the property exists. It certainly has not discouraged appropriate and orderly development of the town and the neighborhood today. Secondly, the proposed use here, a university residence and dining hall, is fully compliant with the use that exists on 3 sides of the property today. It'd be very difficult to argue it's not in harmony with the neighborhood, or to argue that it would discourage appropriate development. To expand on this point, just like to emphasize, Sacred Heart has existed on the property for several decades and recognized by this commission and in the Town Plan of Conservation and Development. The Town Plan of Conservation and Development, adopted by the P&Z in 2016, states that this area includes institutional uses, cites the convalescent facilities, the high school, and the university. Among institutional uses in this area, construction of a residence hall and dining hall is certainly in harmony with both the existing university use and the surrounding neighborhood. 27.4.2 is satisfied. Since it's been established, there's adequate access for fire protection. Section 27.4.3 relates to traffic. I addressed that issue. 27.4.4 is satisfied in that landscaping is provided in the plan. 27.4.5 is satisfied, as I mentioned earlier, inasmuch as the presence of the university is acknowledged in the Town Plan of Conservation and Development. Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, I think the record before the Commission confirms that all relevant criteria are satisfied. I'd request this application be approved. I think the acquisition of this property by the university has provided a multitude of opportunities for the university to improve itself, and I think that the proposed residence hall and dining hall are a prime example of the creativity that the university and its architects provide. The experts and I, as well as the university representatives, will be pleased to answer any questions the Commission may have. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzpatrick. Any questions?
Yes. So would you have the appropriate person find out the number of beds that you will have on campus when you complete all these dorms? And also, do you have any plans to build housing? Is there any housing up on the GE campus? Student housing?
On GE, there's that hotel facility.
Right. But is that student housing at all?
It is not.
No, so you have none. Okay. Are there long-range plans to have some up there, or is it all the student housing going to be on this campus?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I don't know that the university knows the answer to that yet.
Okay.
There are other plans for that campus prior to that that are considerably more imminent, but I don't know the answer to that, Commissioner.
All right, well, if you just get that number for us, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Is there any public comment? Mr. Fitzpatrick, do you want to summarize?
See no need to rebut, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so I'll close the hearing with that. Thank you.
Okay, and then where is this finger I kept talking about? It is the easement, but doesn't the easement